What's
So,
that? What's that controller I can see? Is it a controller I can see behind
help me
you?
out.
A game controller
Ah,
next to
that
is it? I always kind of spot things like that
that
because
was a I went through a charity. Oh, actually, I've got a charity shop story to it. But charity shop, that's Buffalo, the people that make the NAS.
oh
They were
right,
once making controllers, games
no
control. That is
way,
a Moody SNES controller from Buffalo.
no way.
And I was like, well, I'm having that. Hello and welcome back. And that is right. Who have we got next to us here on the screen? Why, it is Ed from SpaceInvaderOne, arguably one of the biggest UnRAID bods on the scene, a guru, a guider. Basically, when it comes to UnRAID, if you are aware of UnRAID, you know who Ed is. And of course, he is the host of the Uncast podcast as well. And in today's video, we're going to have something of a face-off. It's not going to get too aggressive, I hope, because he's bigger than me. And we are going to be looking at turnkey NAS versus UnRAID. And hopefully, by the end of this video, you will know which one is best for you, whether you're an existing turnkey NAS user or you are someone that uses UnRAID. Hopefully, by the end of this video, you will feel lovely and warm and comfortable about the choice you made, or you might walk away with some questions. Either way, Ed, yourself, a little bit of experience about yourself. Want to tell these guys a little bit about yourself, about you and your relationship with UnRAID.
Oh, hi, Robbie. Well, first, thank you very much for having me on your podcast. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on and speak to your audience about the benefits I think UnRAID brings to the table in the field of NASes. I've worked in IT for pretty much as long as I can remember, since the early 2000s. And I got into UnRAID probably in about 2012. After being with the turnkey NAS, I wanted to expand, and it was very difficult to expand the storage. And then I looked at building my own NAS. And in fact, I then went away from UnRAID for a little bit. And then when UnRAID version 6 came out, which had Docker containers and VM support, I was straight back, and I haven't looked back since. For people that don't know me, I run a channel called SpaceInvaderOne, where I make various tutorials, which will guide you through showing you how to set up various things on your UnRAID server. So that's me. Nice to meet you guys. And hopefully by the end of the podcast, I might persuade some of you that UnRAID might be worth a look in.
I just wanted to add to that as well. If you've seen me make an UnRAID video in the last 18 months, I watched some of his videos when I was doing it. And hands down, I might link directly to that video, but he did a fantastic overview of just how fault tolerance works in UnRAID. And it's by far, the video is like 9 years old or something now, but at the same time, it is hands down the most user-friendly guide on exactly what that means, because of the way, and we might touch on that later. I don't know what Ed has to say, but it is a fantastic breakdown on exactly how that is handled, particularly in comparison to how traditional RAID fault tolerance. We're super cool people, everyone. But well, let's kick things off straight away. The way this is going to work is each of us has got 5 wonderful points on either our side. I'm sure he's got it on a digital device. I've got it on paper because I'm terrible. And we are going to be making our way through our individual points, one after the other. We're not really going to argue too much unless we think there's something we can argue, but overall we've got the strengths in our own side. And every time I say turnkey NAS, by the way, I want it just out there. Sometimes I'm going to mention brands, but for the most part, all of the points I'm going to be making can be applied to the bulk of turnkey NAS brands out there. Turnkey NAS is a combined hardware software solution that effectively is ready to go outside the box and is the inclusive experience. And when Ed is discussing UnRAID, and again, not to put words in his mouth, but I'm assuming that is him talking about people that are either building their own or repurposing existing equipment. So whether it's new or repurposing, when he refers to UnRAID, it's going to be largely that. And obviously some features are going to be specific to versions of UnRAID, but that's enough of the old T and C, isn't it? So Ed, over to you. What's your first point on why people should jump ship to UnRAID?
My first point probably is the amount of customization and flexibility that UnRAID brings to the table. You can basically build up your server pretty much how you want it to be. You're not kind of like just constrained to what the manufacturer of the turnkey NAS wants you to be able to do. You're able to not only kind of set up storage, and there's multiple different ways you can set up that storage, but also you've got the luxury of being able to install Docker containers. And for people that might not know what a Docker container is, It's basically running an application in its own little sandboxed area. And with UnRAID, you have pretty much the option to install any Docker container that runs on Linux. So you're not just constrained to what the manufacturer says, we will only allow this Docker container and that Docker container. You can install anything from Plex to MB to NextCloud, many different Docker containers. And also you can install VMs, which I think is a great kind of customization. So you can run even a Windows gaming VM, and if you put inside your server a graphics card, you could pass that through. So for you gaming guys out there, if you wanted your kind of 4090 Ti's, I'd be very jealous if you have one, because I don't. You could pass that through, and you could game on into nearly bare metal performance. So customization. That's my kind of first point, that, you know, the NAS is yours and you can do with it whatever you want.
Okay, so we started early and you've gone right for the jugular. I will say immediately straight off the bat, like, and when it comes to NAS, I can't argue. As much as I love NAS and we can use containers on NAS and VMs, the rigidity of NAS compared with UnRAID is an unarguable point. It's one of those areas where the way NAS, turnkey NAS brands, again, your Synology, your QNAP, your whatever, and they build within that closed framework, even if we were generous and said that they are, you know, maintaining stability on their systems, it has to be said that they also have portfolios of solutions that they tend to not like overlap too much. And the consequence is that some of these systems have arguably an element of containment actually built into them to remain within a price point. But of course, the result is, as you rightly point out, you lack there is a tremendous sense of rigidity there, and the flexibility. I mean, when you mention about if you've got an old super beefy graphics card, and again, you can send it to us. If you've got one knocking around, you can put them in some QNAPs and utilize and do pass through. But I think there's 11 graphics cards supported in the world on their verified list. 11.
All right.
11. So it's hardly an absolutely
are those is that really rigid with the 11, or is it 11 that they know definitely works and they don't want to say that? I'm sure, you know, it seems strange that there would only be 11. Like if one was like an AMD card, like kind of say the 6700 XT, surely the 6600 XT would work as well. Unfortunately, it's so similar.
You have absolutely hit the nail in the jugular once again, because the graphics card support does vary from card to card as well. So overall, as far even in the NASs that have actually integrated graphics cards over the years, such as the Synology DVA appliance that's got a graphics card inside, it can only be used for surveillance. It doesn't even utilize the HDMI out for a local input, and ultimately, I mean, again, I could try to put up something of a vague fight to say, yes, there is customization in NAS, and there is customization with the utilization of containers, but the true scalability is still built within quite a rigid infrastructure. So if you are looking at, again, to you, the user, if you're considering containers massively off the bat, it's incredibly difficult to argue with just how smooth the experience is for containers on UnRAID. But I'm going to pick myself up off the floor. I'm going to dust off with my counterpoint here, which is going to be, when it comes to turnkey NAS, it's just so bloody easy. It's so easy. It's if you, and I hate to use this expression, but if you are money rich, time poor, what a disgusting phrase. But if you are looking for something that just sets up and shuts up, that's from the moment you turn it on to any time you use it, it's incredibly difficult to say that turnkey NAS is not easier than UnRAID. It clearly is. It's so straightforward to set up. It's so hand-holdy and everything beginning to end on NAS, unless you go like dedicated iSCSI SAN solution where you're barely going to be dealing with a GUI or any proprietary stuff, and it's more of a targeted solution. Outside of those kind of unified storage hyperscale, the rest of NAS devices, from the lowest of the low to the mid to the high, all of them are just so easy to set up and you interact with a lot of the time with the tools that I'll touch about later on. And just ultimately, when it comes to UnRAID, I know UnRAID is arguably, when it comes to either open source, freemium, or low price open source built type software, any of those different variants out there outside of turnkey, it's probably the easiest of those, but it still isn't as straightforward as easy as NAS.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Obviously buying a turnkey NAS is super simple. Probably even my grandma could kind of work it out. If she could plug the LAN port in the back of the in the back of the NAS, she'd have it running. But yeah, it is very easy, and it is one of the kind of, I totally agree, it is one of the advantages and the things that definitely tempt people to have a turnkey NAS, for it being super easy to set up. But I would say, in my defense, if you can operate a Windows computer, you can plug a USB stick in there, and you can download a program from a website that will create the stick. And then when you put the stick into your server, you can hit the F key to make it boot.
Oh, slow down. What?
The F key.
Oh, okay. The F key.
I'm not swearing, honestly.
No,
Robbie.
I was going to say. So right now, the skill set is
pretty straightforward.
Buy a USB F key. Okay, so I'll admit that's not too difficult, and I'm sure
there
are
people... you got to kind of change the BIOS setting to make it always boot from that, but it's pretty straightforward.
Someone in the comments right now has put, you need to be brain dead to not be able to do UnRAID. Someone's put that. I don't know who, but they've put it. Someone's put that right now. What's your next counterpoint?
My next counterpoint really is going to kind of carry on from a bit, is scalability. So with UnRAID, it's very easy to start small and scale things up. I'm going to kind of combine this point and also go back to your point of, like you saying, people being kind of what was it, time poor?
It was
and
money rich, time poor.
And
I was sick in my own mouth when I said that, by the way. Working class kids shouldn't say that, okay? We shouldn't even think that expression, but carry on, yes.
But so with scalability, I'm going to talk about that in kind of like multiple kind of ways. So you're saying about people, like I say, being, just wanting to kind of buy something, plug it in and forget about it. Well, that has its advantages, because yes, you can do that, but then you never know any kind of new things that might come down the pipeline that your hardware can do. So if you kind of buy a NAS and all you want to do is you think, well, I'm only going to need to kind of store the family photos on there, that's it. That's all you'll ever do, because you're never going to open your mind to other things that your NAS can possibly do. The amount of different UnRAID servers I've built over the years, from when I first started building one, thinking I just need to be able to kind of have somewhere to keep, files that are going to be safe, to then later on building kind of servers that run multiple VMs, that run my home assistant that automates the whole of the house, to running my own kind of NextCloud, my own media server that does everything for the house. But I didn't know I wanted to do that all at first. And so the hardware that I bought when I first bought the UnRAID server, I had to actually upgrade it, because the first UnRAID server that I built was in a Gen 8 micro server. I'm not sure if you're familiar with those, Robbie. There, yeah, little kind of like 4 bay thing. So I thought, oh, that's kind of nice. It looked a bit similar to a link station that I had once. And I got bored of the link station, took it out of its case, and I think I built it into one of those Apple Cube computers that, probably looking back now, was a really stupid idea, because that's probably worth quite a lot of money now. But I was
going to say, but it probably looked lovely.
but yeah, I thought, I wanted it in something different. But having built that, I would say kind of like 4 months later, I was rebuilding it, because I realized the potential of what UnRAID could do in the version 6 with the VMs and containers. I think this just isn't enough. But the good thing with UnRAID is, when you actually kind of scale up, you don't necessarily need to buy a whole load of new hardware. You can use a lot of the hardware that you've already bought. And with scaling up within the storage, I don't know if there's any other, correct me if I'm wrong, turnkey solutions that allow you to really add and keep adding different disks of different sizes. So with UnRAID, you have either 1 or 2 parity disks, and these are separate to where your data is stored. In a normal RAID situation, the parity is striped across all of the drives. So you can't really easily expand an array without taking all of the data off, putting it somewhere else, adding some extra drives, reformatting with your array because the parity goes across all of them. Well, UnRAID, you can actually add disks because the parity is on separate disks. It just calculates the algorithm allowing you to add extra disks.
With the odd even thing, yeah. Sorry.
So it's very easy to actually, you might think, well, I'm only going to need 20 terabytes, and you need 30. We'll buy another 10 terabyte disk, and so long as the data disk is at least the same size as your parity in size, you can just add whatever you like. Or if you've got like a 2 terabyte disk lying around and you want to put that in, that can be alongside the 10s, and you lose no space whatsoever. You have the total space available of those drives. Probably I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, yeah, but the date, because it's not striped across all of the drives, the speed is going to be slower.
I was going to say something else, but I'm going to let you finish.
Which is quite true. On that array, it would be slower because the read and write is basically going to only one disk at a time. But say I had an array of 10 disks, for instance, and I had 2 parity drives. That allows me to lose 2 disks at once and still be able to recover and rebuild the data. So say, disk 9 and 10 fail, I replace them with drives and start rebuilding it. I can, so long as the rebuild goes through successfully without any other drives failing, I'll be able to recover those 2 drives and I'll be back to where I was. But say drives 6 and 7 also failed during the rebuild process, because most of us, when we have our NASs, we normally buy most of the hard drives all at the same time.
Same vendor, yeah.
Yeah, so when one fails, because it's kind of old, the others are about the same age, so they might fail too. So that's always something I think people need to kind of keep into consideration. But with UnRAID, if say drive 6 and 7 failed at that time, yes, you will have lost drive 6 and 7 and 9 and 10 because you've had 4 drives fail. But the other 6, you can get all of the data still off it. But in a normal kind of NAS where the data is striped across all of the drives, if you lose more drives than what, the parity, like RAID 5 or, with 1 disk worth of parity, if you kind of lose more than those drives, you'll never recover the data. So I would say for data recovery, UnRAID has a little bit of an advantage. And like I said, I was going to say, sorry if I'm kind of talking too much.
No.
For me saying, yes, it's a bit slower on the reads and writes because you're reading from 1 drive at a time. We've just had a new release of UnRAID 6.12, where now ZFS has been implicated into UnRAID. And so you can also, as well as the main UnRAID array, you can have ZFS arrays as well. So you could have, multiple ZFS disks in an array, and like, RAID Z2, RAID Z3. So you can have 3 drives of parity. And because it's striped across all of the disks, you've got the speed. So it's very high speed. With the ZFS, you've got the self-healing data. So, it has checksums.
It is very much the best of both worlds in that latest iteration of that, to be able to integrate ZFS in. I mean, what I would say, with going back to your earlier point about scalability, for the most part, I completely agree that UnRAID has absolutely unparalleled levels of scalability in terms of storage. I would say with NAS, you can expand a RAID unless you go for, say, like a QNAP running a ZFS, where if you try to expand the ZFS pool, you're actually creating another RAID group and kind of silently bolting it on rather than...
So just you're creating another VDEV and then adding it to the pool. Yeah.
But normally XT and even some of the BTRFS kind of... or moving away from the file system slightly back to the storage pool, you can expand existing storage pools by adding drives in a RAID 5 or RAID 6 environment. But with NAS, as you pointed out, you kind of have a finite amount of space. You can't take the drives, pop them into a 24-bay case. You can migrate drives between a NAS system as long as you stay within that NAS brand, within that NAS software. There's lots of caveats, but you can migrate into those bigger systems. But the fact of the matter is, the expandability is still severely limited to that single ecosystem, and it's when you're in that system, you can't bolt on a bunch more bays. The closest you can get to that is using maybe an expansion chassis, such as the DX517 from Synology or something like that, and they are woefully overpriced for a JBOD box that you're connecting via an eSATA cable, which is 5 bays of storage connected via a 6 gig eSATA connection. So you've already got a bit of a throttle there, and I know it seems like I'm defeating my own point, but I am going somewhere. And then you've got flexible RAID systems, such as from TerraMaster and Synology, which do actually allow you to mix and match the drives at the cost of a small performance dip. But you can maybe go on day one in a 6-bay system. The first day, you've got 3 drives in a RAID 5. Oh, sorry, a Synology hybrid RAID flexible. It's their equivalent of a RAID 5. And then later on, you can add a few 10 TBs, and it will adopt those large capacities into that environment. But it's still, nevertheless, you're still left with that limited ecosystem physical expansion environment, and secondly, and probably more annoying than anything, when you look at, say, Synology as a brand, they include that flexible RAID, but they stop providing it after you hit the SMB market. The minute you go towards enterprise or bigger business models, they've removed that feature, and you have to stick to traditional RAIDs. The reason they do that is it has a slight performance dip compared to traditional RAID systems. So it's never perfect. It has some of the things in NAS that you described there, but it's never realized as an accessible. I've said this in my UnRAID videos as well, nowhere near as many as yourself, that UnRAID is so fantastically flexible and scalable, and Turnkey NAS has bits of it, depending on which brand you go for, but no single one has all of that. And at the same time, the idea that you can have, I've got my ZFS storage here, and I'm going to go with my little UnRAID bit there. The idea that you can have that all within the UnRAID ecosystem, again, isn't something we have in Turnkey NAS, and will always be disappointing. But I will crack on with my next point. And again, these are all going to sound
Can I stop you for one moment, Robbie? Just to ask you a question for my own curiosity. I don't have much experience with Turnkey NASs at all, so can you choose the file system on Turnkey NAS is what you're going to use? Like, do they give you much choice, or is it kind of like, this is the best, that they say this is the best file system you should use, you can only use this file system? Or do you have a choice of how you can format the disks? Is that something?
It depends very much on the model, which I know. I can already hear you thinking, it depends. This thing compromise. I can hear it through the Zoom, but you're right. So, for example, if you go for some of the lower tier stuff, if you look at, say, QNAP only has ext4 until you get to NAS devices that retail for about $1,000, because they get to that hardware point within the inclusive software hardware ecosystem of your purchase, where there's enough hardware there to support ZFS, and then you can choose ext4 or ZFS. Rolling back to Synology, they've got support of ext4 or BTRFS. Asustor and TerraMaster both support BTRFS. An advantage to NAS, and again, this will lean heavily into a less experienced user. I'm not going to use that expression to do with time or money, because it genuinely makes me sick every time I so much as think it. But with UnRAID, when you're accessing UnRAID on client devices in a more tailored manner, so say you only want to access it via certain types of multimedia, you only want to access it in certain kinds of smart home appliances, there isn't really a lot of first-party tools. There's integration of third-party containers, third-party container images, and applications, but there's not a lot of first-party co-developed tools. When I make a comparison here to Synology, Synology, QNAP, Asustor, any of those brands, they have a myriad of mobile applications, each of which are tailored to your different needs. If you're looking for a backup app, a surveillance app, a photo app with AI photo recognition, music that's tailored in that playlist, iTunes, home, Alexa kind of stuff. The idea that you can ask your Alexa to play music from your Synology, and you won't need to dig deep into containers. You just install the audio station app on the Alexa, and that's it. You can just tell it to play music from your NAS in the same way it might play from Amazon Music. And the same goes for Fire TV with applications for streaming, so you won't have to use a third-party tool like Plex, where you might end up having to use Plex and then getting a Plex pass for support of some features or transcoding. Synology Video Station has transcoding hardware engine, and also because it's running lower down on the bare metal level, He has better and more integrated utilization of the hardware resources in multimedia playback. And the same goes for scraping of metadata and all of the features and applications that a lot of third-party apps offer. Again, I'm pulling Synology out of the air here just to keep it all in one frame. Synology has first-party applications that replace a lot of those third-party tools, and they're included with the NAS purchase. So again, they've got their surveillance station application, which is genuinely one of the best surveillance platforms I've ever used. They've got their own virtual machine deployment tool, their own with Docker input, their own container manager application there. Synology Drive, Synology Office, I would argue, is as good as Google Docs, not quite as good as Office 365, but it's there. They've got a chat application that rivals Skype and WhatsApp, and it's all integrated in that single system, all there. And I don't know of an open source or semi-paid or freemium or whatever we want to call it, alternative to Turnkey NAS that provides that sheer scope of client and OS tools.
Well, I don't know where to start in my rebuttal for that, because I got so many things.
Go for it. Right.
I could say.
Fresh up.
Right. So
excellent use of the word rebuttal, by the way.
The first thing I'm going to say, I'm going to be a bit mean here. I think I'm going to say, wasn't it one of these first party programs that there was an exploit in called which had the deadbolt? So our first party applications really that great? How often are they up? How often are they updated? How often are they improved? You mentioned the Google kind of Docs replacement with the Synology. I haven't tried it, so I really can't comment on how good it is. But if you've ever used NextCloud, which is a very, very kind of like well-developed alternative to Google Docs, self-hosted. You don't have to pay for it if you self-host it yourself. You only have to pay for it if you want support. The German government uses it, and I think they've got about 28,000 users on their NextCloud. So you've got that constantly being developed. So I would say things come out, probably updates for NextCloud come out almost on a weekly basis, or kind of, at least a monthly basis. So you've constantly got that development of a whole team that is just devoted to that application. So I don't really see why having, you might be able to go onto your Synology and put their version of this on there, and it might have apps that kind of connect, but does it matter who makes them? In my opinion, I would rather have what I would consider the best app for the job, rather than one that's just made by the manufacturer of whoever makes my hardware or software, etc. With UnRAID, we also have our own VM manager. That's all kind of built within the software to manage VMs, to try and make it easy. It's very easy to pass through graphics cards. It's made to be very simple compared to how it might be in another solution such as Proxmox, or if you were just setting up VMs from command line in Ubuntu. Again, UnRAID uses QEMU and KVM, which is, basically the Linux hypervisor. So that's constantly improved and developed. It's not just UnRAID developing it. All of this comes from the actual Linux kernel, and so you get the updates. Not always kind of like dependent on the first party, and things like you're saying about for media playback. I don't know what the media playback devices would be like that plays directly off the turnkey NASs, but I think Plex and Emby are pretty much the go-to playback and media server devices kind of worldwide now, really. So a lot of TVs have those apps built in. So you've got like Ember you can have on your Samsung TV, Plex on your Samsung TV, and yes, it it may be easier on the Synology if they have Plex and Ember. You can just press a button and install it, and it links it to where your media is. Because
that's the point I was going to add there. I should have probably added as well in mind that there is support of a number of those different services that you added there as well, as via container, via those registries and repositories, or via proprietary first-party apps there integrated in. But I think it would have to be fair to say that there's... turn my phone off there. I think it would be fair to say that those applications, when they run on there, they're not given the priority on those first-party turnkey NAS as their own applications there. So you're right. I think a lot of people are going to want to use their own choice third-party app to get the job done, and there is an element of support on the NAS side for a lot of those services to download them, but certainly not all, and certainly not the flexibility of the likes of UnRAID. I'm going to answer that before I drive myself crazy. Don't you hate phones? Anyway, I digress. How terribly rude of me to leave that on. Right, on to my next point. Let's see if Ed can combat this one. Nice and simple, single warranty. Now, obviously, let's be realistic. Your hard drives and your SSDs you might be getting from another brand, but there are brands like, Synology, where you can pretty much go single warranty. So that's the same warranty covering your MOBO, your CPU, your NICs, your PSU, your case, your memory, even the hard drives and SSD now with Synology, a single ecosystem, even up to surveillance cameras, routers all around, much like Unify in that respect. And I think as good as UnRAID is, if you're someone that monitors your warranties, you're worried about your guarantees. Also, when you're putting a device together and you've got a CPU and a MOBO from a different manufacturer with the PSU, that's come from Coolmaster or something, maybe you've got the case with it, your memory modules in there, everything from the top to the bottom, you normally end up with, when you do a custom build, a handful of warranties with different brands, all at different lengths. And sometimes when something goes wrong, you have to troubleshoot the whole system in order to identify the weakness that is causing the issue. Whereas when you go with a turnkey NAS solution, you are getting that single warranty. You're getting a 2, 3 or 5 year warranty, which can be extended, much like your washing machine, guys. You should really check in on that, everyone. But ultimately, it is a single point of call. If there's a problem, I've got this one portal to talk to. Now, can UnRAID give me, or the person at home, that?
You can do exactly the same.
Do you hate me? Sorry, carry on.
But buy a server from HP, put your UnRAID USB stick in the back, and you've got your whole server with the warranty from HP.
Right, I'm out. Right.
But and as well, like, it's not always an advantage to have, in my opinion, your warranty all with one company. Maybe kind of Synology and kind of the big brand of turnkeys have very good warranty, but I'm sure there's probably some brands of turnkey NAS that are less well known that may have more questionable warranty. Say as well, for instance, in your NAS, the power supply failed. You're going to have to send your whole NAS back, I would imagine, to have that replaced by them under warranty, and you're going to be without your NAS for a while.
There are some that allow external warranties, but your external PSUs that you can buy off the shelf,
right? But
you would need to buy one of their PSUs in a lot of cases to not void your warranty. So yeah, that's a very good point that I'm now regretting. Carry on.
Yeah, but basically, when you have multiple warranties, if something goes wrong, I think you can replace that part yourself. But I totally agree with you that some people might not want to do that. They don't want to have to tinker with any kind of hardware. They don't want to have to open up the case and replace something. And it's nice to have the vendor support for the whole thing. But I would say with UnRAID, you can have kind of a lot of that if you wanted just to buy an off-the-shelf server from HP or Dell and run the operating system you want on that. You would have the peace of mind of the whole of the hardware being covered by a warranty.
Yeah. Do you know what? I'm going to call that a bit of a draw. I think I might have got close to winning that one. Who knows? I'm sure the comments will tell us who sucks. But over to you. So what would be your next counterpoint?
My next counterpoint would be cost effectiveness. I believe that what you get for the money with turnkey NAS solutions is very overpriced for the hardware. Some of them are extremely expensive. With UnRAID, you can build a NAS for a very small amount of money. Obviously, the hard drives are going to cost the same whether you go with turnkey or with UnRAID or any other solution. But hardware-wise, you can repurpose hardware you've already got. You know, have you got an old PC that you don't use anymore? Even if it's like kind of 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, like I say, I've still got a Gen 8 microserver which came out in 2013, and that will run UnRAID. It won't run it, you know, with all the kind of things I'd like to do on my main server, but as a backup server, just for storing kind of photos, for being a media server, it works okay. So you might already have the hardware in your house that, you know, you've got a cupboard under the stairs where, you know, you've got a whole bunch of things that you don't like to throw away. Have a look there. Maybe you've got a PC there, put some hard drives in it, run UnRAID, see if you like it. You know, there's not many kind of turnkey NASs that will send you out their NAS and say, try this out for a month. If you like it, we'll sell you one. If you don't, then, you know, just give it us back. But, you know, you can try UnRAID out on old hardware you've already got. So that's kind of an advantage. But cost effectiveness, you can build, you know, maybe we'll look into it later in this podcast, some examples of some very cheap builds for kind of like under £300. You can build quite a powerful NAS. And plus, you know, go onto eBay, find an old Dell or HP server. But if you're in the UK, don't run it because our electricity costs are so much. And some of the old enterprise equipment is quite kind of power hungry. But it's just another way of getting into, you know, using old hardware. You can buy something old or put something together. I mean, so that's my point for that. You know, I don't know what the cheapest NAS would be turnkey wise that you would consider decent, but I'm sure it's going to be kind of like what, $500 to $700.
Well, funny you should say that. It's almost like someone made 3 videos recently on his channel that are now, I mean, I have to plug them. I have to plug them now because you've made me plug them. The best NAS you can buy for 500 quid, 250 quid, and even 100 quid. Some of them are cheap as chips, but obviously the hardware is scoped accordingly. I will say, again, one of the big points people make about the cost of NAS, and the problem is it's very hard to quantify, and that is the cost of the software. All the things that I've discussed thus far all, you know, take a bit of cost, whether it's runtime, security updates, R&D, or just stability. All of those individual client apps, all of the UI, all of the individual apps, all of that stuff in between, and the support and even marketing budgets and all that nonsense. I'm not defending them, but nevertheless, these things all cost money. And when you're looking at a NAS, it does differ from brand to brand, or at least in terms of hardware. If we use just the hardware example, when it comes to a Synology, most Synology NASs I see, not even half of the money you're spending is going towards the hardware. The majority of that money is going towards that software, and particularly for Synology and DSM, less so in some of the other brands, but definitely the money that you pay is divided.
Could I ask you a question? I was going to ask you earlier and I forgot.
Cool. No worries.
With kind of like turnkey NASs, where do they normally where does the operating system run from? Does it store it on the actual hard drives that you put in? Has it got its own kind of like storage inside of the NAS? The reason I ask is, like, when I was talking earlier about that link station I had, I remember when I first bought the link station, it must have been 2011 or something. Me being me, I didn't want to spend too much money, and so I bought the one with the smallest hard drives. And I thought, that's good. I'll take those hard drives out, sell them on eBay, and I'll replace them with 4 new hard drives. So I did that. I sold the hard drives before I bought the new hard drives, and I got 4 new hard drives, put it in, and the link station didn't work. And I was like, And I rang up the Buffalo support, and they said, "Oh no, actually the operating system's actually on the disks." and luckily the lady sent me the file to actually better.
Well, the answer lies in modern NAS, turnkey NAS, somewhere in the middle. So pretty much all the NAS brands right now all arrive with a flash little SSD module inside. It's, you know, not read only. It does, you know, have the updates going on to it. They have the latest version of their respective software. So, for example, Synology and QNAPs have like a dedicated SSD DOM inside. I'm not 100% certain about Asustor. I think they do the same. I know TerraMaster uses an internal USB key, near enough identical to that of UnRAID architecture. Hence why it's so easy to put UnRAID on a TerraMaster. It's one of the easiest things. But video in the description or on the side of the screen, knowing YouTube. Thanks, algorithm. But with that, when you do set up the NAS for the first time, it does install the OS on the drives. It runs it, the initial installation. But if you turn off a Synology NAS, for example, that you've installed DSM on, that it pulls the installer or the bootloader and installer from the USB to install DSM onto those drives. If you power it down, remove the drives, turn it back on, it will just say there are no drives. And if you put in fresh drives, it will do a fresh installation. So
that's good to know that that's like that, you know. it was so horrible when I bought that thing.
That's presumably,
and I was just like thinking, oh my god, I've sold the drives. And the lady, like, you know, the support lady, she was going, I'm not really allowed to do this, but but again, she said, I'm going to send you the file. And
it was almost certainly instances like that caused it. But yeah, the fact that the OS, and the strange thing is, you can have the OS running on the drives inside a NAS before you've created the storage pool, which is something I've always found very peculiar. And I didn't do it for the channel, but I did a few checks with drives that were inside a NAS to see if it had created a partition. And one of them had to create a very, very small partition that just had the base level OS. So even if you don't create your storage pool, because you can put the drives inside a Synology NAS, you can get all the way to the desktop. You can install the latest software, set up your password, your two-step, all of that stuff, all the way through to the storage manager without even creating a storage pool. You've still got access to all of the OS before you've even created a storage pool. However, if you remove those drives, it won't run. So yeah, the OS, even in its most primitive form, lives on those drives, which is going to be a negative for some users, no doubt. But overall, when it comes to the cost of NAS, it's just, and whether you think of it as a defense or whether you think of it as an unjustifiable cost, with turnkey NAS being turnkey, unfortunately, it makes it very difficult to appraise NAS in terms of their price unless we can quantify the software. And because the software is technically the same on a £250 NAS or a £2,500 NAS, it's just a question of how much it can do and some services extra it can do. It's really tough to quantify the cost of the software because clearly it's a ratio and a percentage factor overall. But if you're okay for me to move forward on to my next point.
Certainly, please do.
And I'm fairly certain you're going to counter this point, but we're going to give it a go anyway. And that is, of course, performance. You touched on it earlier on, and of course, more recent updates into UnRAID somewhat argue against this point. But traditionally, for a very long time, when it comes to turnkey NAS, particularly thanks to the innovations of multi-drive read-write operations in certain RAID configurations, the performance of turnkey NAS systems has always been more than UnRAID. UnRAID wasn't until relatively recently that you could get decent performance boost, which I'm sure you're going to counterpoint / argue with me / shout at me in a moment. But overall, I think when it comes to turnkey NAS and easy performance numbers without going down the road of creating areas of SSD outside of your storage pools, and you only want to use the drives that you've gone for, you can, max out or fully saturate a 10G, with 4 to 5 hard drives in the right configuration without reliance on SSD. And turnkey NAS provides you the ability to do that without almost any tinkering necessary. So what would you say to that?
I'd say yes. With the what I'll call normal regular UnRAID array, you are going to get better performance out of a turnkey NAS on that particular array. But when you set up UnRAID, you don't really need to even set up a full array. You could just set up a ZFS pool and have the exact same performance as you would from a turnkey NAS. It would basically be dependent on the speed of your hardware, the drives you got in. You could make a pool of NVMe drives if you want. You can make a pool of SSDs, or you can make a pool of normal, regular spinning Rust hard drives. So I would say you are definitely right before probably March of this year, which I think is when 6.12 happened. But also I'll say as well, for a lot of people, they kind of say, oh, with the older kind of UnRAID with its normal array, oh yeah, but it's kind of faster for this, that, and the other. And all they do is they run a media server on it. I'm thinking, well, why do you need such fast read speeds to watch your 1.5 hour long movie? What do you want to do? Like kind of like put it on 1,000 times speed so you can, that will come. It depends on your workload. A lot of people don't need some of the speed, and also a lot of people as well. I've known people like they've got like a NAS, whether it's UnRAID, whether it's anything else, and they connect to it with their laptop over a really ropey Wi-Fi.
Yeah. And
so the bottleneck is actually on the Wi-Fi going to there anyway. Like most people don't plug their laptop in with LAN. A lot of people, they've got nice Wi-Fi, they've got good Wi-Fi 6, and it is important. Or if there's lots of different clients connecting to the NAS, speed will be very important for them, but it all depends on the workload as well. But UnRAID does have both systems that you can utilize. So if you want to have a very fast pool of storage, set it up to be very fast. If you don't care about that so much and you want to have more flexibility without having to set up extra VDEVs to expand out your storage, use the UnRAID array or use a combination of the both.
But that flexibility is always going to be advantageous there for UnRAID. Yeah. I just think more about the simplicity of doing it. There are inherent advantages as well to, databases that are running from within the system where you might not be overly reliant on the speed of an external network connection, and you might be connecting to a VM on the NAS where 1 gig, what's a VM when you're thinking externally? It's no better than a YouTube.
Synchronous writes, you do want to have good speed for sure.
So having that
databases would be definitely something that I would totally agree for that.
But I think in terms of for a video editor and stuff like that, I'm seeing a lot more of, I'm not going to say content creators, but I'm definitely going to say those working in post-production that are starting to be lured away from turnkey NAS. Once they've realized they may not have a system admin, but they've realized they've just got to jump over the early hurdles to head towards true NAS, where you've got a lot of those performance benefits. And yes, there is that early uphill struggle at the beginning skill-wise, but what they're seeing there is a lot more beefier hardware they can use when they realize a lot of the inclusive elements of turnkey NAS they're simply not going to use. And for those users, I still think they would err more towards true NAS when they've got that skill behind them than UnRAID. But UnRAID is still going to have a lot of benefits to them. But that's enough of my point there. Over to you for your next point. I believe it might be your last point as well. I'm not sure.
I've got a couple of points actually.
Oh, far away then, yeah.
So my next point is going to be the UnRAID community. I believe we've got a really good community in UnRAID. It's one of the friendliest communities that I've ever kind of known in kind of online forums and that kind of thing. And which is one of the reasons why I started making YouTube videos to do with UnRAID, is because the community is just very friendly, very easily approachable. You see some kind of forums where people kind of like, you get like a new person, like people, oh, you don't know that, it's really bad, like you go away and come back when you know that. But you get people on, with UnRAID, we're a really friendly bunch of people. And if you kind of like set up an UnRAID server, come and ask the most dumb question on the forums and we'll do our best to help you, because we know that we all started knowing nothing, and we were all at the same level you were when you first started, and we enjoy helping people and getting them, a lot of the people who run UnRAID, it's our hobby, we enjoy it, it's what we like to do. And so helping other people, bring up to the level you want to be and get your servers working. There's so many helpful people that will be on the forums, and Reddit as well. There's a great Reddit community. So that's one of the advantages I would say for UnRAID, is we have a very healthy, friendly community.
That's incredibly difficult to argue with, not just tangentially and without doing prior research, but unfortunately, you're right. When I did a video a few months ago, when it came up, Linus of LTT, and his NAS investment thing. That's something for another video, and we're making a video about that. But as the software in question appears to be being made in development with some ex-UnRAID employees, and the LTT, the channel itself is a huge advocate of UnRAID as a platform. It was inevitable that I spent a lot of the time researching for that video in the UnRAID world, and there was not a lot of negativity. Fair play, there was not. And I'm someone that has to follow numerous turnkey NAS brands. And when I'm researching and someone will ask a question, and you're right, you will see more often than not a question on the lines of, no, you're doing it wrong, stupid, which is not great.
Yeah,
when
no one likes that.
From
it
the outside.
Doesn't do any good to anyone.
And it's worse still when you see a comment like that and it's 1 year ago. And you look at it and you go, that 1 year ago, that person might have just gone, well, I'm not going to bother. And you're right, that kind of toxicity in any kind of public forum and is awful. And with UnRAID, given the age that UnRAID is, and everyone that's been in it at the beginning, it was new to them, not just new to IT. A lot of those people at the beginning were very IT versed. But if you go back to the Wild West days of data storage and how little was known about the crossover between data storage and network storage and where the limitations were, that is an enormous learning curve that had to be like scaled. And you're right, to have maintained a positive sense like that within that community is to be admired and made jealous of. But no, I'm on to my last point, which I'm fairly certain you're going to argue with, but we'll see, because this is a question mark around ease. And I know there are counterpoints for this, but I'm going to plow on with it because I do genuinely believe, I know I might even undermine my own point later on. This seems like an incredibly unconfident delivery, but there is a reason for it. And that is, in most cases, when you buy a turnkey NAS, it is built around efficiency. And that efficiency is built around so many different things. So a lot of the CPUs that are utilized are chosen based on their power efficiency to be on for days, weeks, months, years at a time. The cases themselves are designed with airflow being hugely important, be it rack mount or desktop, and power consumption over time and the impending detrimental effect of long-term use on these have to be factored in exponentially, not only because obviously it's data and it might fall over and someone will lose their data, but the last thing they want to do is keep hopping in with a new CPU because the thermal paste went dry. And the idea that around turnkey NAS is that the desire for efficiency is so close to the front of their development, I think needs to be acknowledged. Because when you look at, and I'm going to say UnRAID, but I'm also going to say a lot of third parties out there, be they open source or, somewhere in the middle, like Open Media Vault and stuff like that. A lot of those sources, because they're producing the software, the end user is kind of told, you're going to have to be in charge of power efficiency. You mentioned the cost of UK pricing, and it made me want to turn the lights off in this room, to be frank. But they're LED. I'm fine. I know you're worried. Don't worry. But when it comes to efficiency, and if you're that concerned with power consumption, not only have you got the hardware in terms of built for efficiency, but then you go into the software where most NAS is by default. The settings there for fan spin automation is set incredibly aggressively to spin down when it's needed. Not just wake on LAN, but spin up, spin down system, auto power off, scheduled on off. All of these are options that are presented to you very early doors in a NAS, and that urge for efficiency is definitely built into the very early stages of development of any turnkey NAS solution. And it's just going for UnRAID. This isn't an attack on UnRAID, which I know has a lot of those controls built into it, but you are kind of dependent on those controls being compatible with your larger system and that they're all plugged in right, and the CPU fan is in just the right sodding place, and the external fans. So it's not so much anti-UnRAID at this point as pro turnkey NAS. The efficiency is so important, and it's never been, I'm so tempted to turn them off, never been more efficient. Been important to keep your servers efficient as now, not just the cost of components, but the cost of electricity.
Well, I can't really argue with that one, Robbie, and I think probably, I'm going to put that down as a win to you.
Hey! Just anyway, so it's been lovely. Thanks for watching, everyone.
I don't want it to be a flawless victory and fatality.
Okay.
So I'm going to try and get up off the floor a little bit with it. yes, they are going to be built around efficiency, but there's one thing with the regular UnRAID array that I would say turnkey NASs can't do. So if you're not really wanting to have the workload that has mega speed, so you're not going to have any kind of ZFS pools or other pools, is when you're using an UnRAID array, say the data you're accessing is on disk 1 and you've got 10 disks in the server, only disk 1 will spin up. So we don't need to spin up all of the disks, but on a normal NAS, all of the disks will spin up at once when you need to access any data. So just the kind of the way UnRAID's array works, it's more power efficient in that way out of the box without you having to do anything. And we've also got other kind of like little plugins, like this tips and tweaks plugin, where you can change the CPU scaling governor. You can set that to power save, which I do on my server. And you can also have it so it comes on at different times. So during the night, it can run at a more power efficient level over the night, because you think, well, you're not going to be using it so much. Then you can say during the daytime, well, you can run at your normal performance level. So, but I would say, yes, you are right, because people can build anything they want to, and so they could have something that kind of uses. I think I did a podcast with Jason from Bite My Bits a while ago, and I think he said his server he had some crazy machine, and it was like he's saying, yeah, it's using about 600 watts, and then I nearly kind of like fell off my chair and died when I heard that.
You just phoned up EDF Energy and went, "You'll never believe this."
They said, send him to the UK. We want to like have him living here so we can charge him for the electricity here.
But as I mentioned earlier on, I'm going to shoot myself in the foot a little bit, because I do think, in the spirit of fairness, I can't just stick a bow on that and walk away with my point, because one of the other things I've discussed a few times this year is the growing middle ground. I've mentioned this in a bunch of other videos, but you can buy top-ten NAS, top-ten little servers. You can buy now a lot of these pre-made servers in the middle are OS free, and a lot of those have efficiency built around them. So even if you do go open source, or you go slightly paid, whatever we're going to be calling it, ultimately, if you go UnRAID, even if you don't want to build it from scratch yourself, there are those options in the middle in terms of power efficiency, where again, you need to buy one of those and a USB key if you've got change, and then you've got that option. But over to what I believe is your final point.
I'm just going to make another little kind of point back to that as well. In my opinion, if you had like a turnkey NAS solution and you're the company that makes it, yes, you're going to want it to be power efficient. But if you could have it be power efficient and use a cheaper CPU that may not have as much performance, but it will get the job done and the customer will be happy, they're going to use that. Even if they could have one that maybe slightly may have the same power efficiency but be more expensive, they're unlikely to choose that one. So the cost of hardware will be down. They will want to make it as cheap as possible. They're not going to want to kind of have necessarily the best components. They're going to want to have the cheapest hardware that they can get away with selling the consumer, in my opinion.
Market forces are always going to be a factor. You're right. And the problem is, it's very hard to define that. As much as my heart agrees with that, I know, unless I saw out and out evidence, like Synology still using the Celeron J4000 series processor that came out in 2019, and they're releasing a solution that's coming out in August 2023. But we've got no evidence to back up what you're saying, that they're using a CPU that's crazy old that even Intel have moved away from. But we just don't know. Anyway, over to you. What's your last point?
My last point is UnRAID is very fun. It's not only like a little box you put in the corner, and it's fun. If you're a bit nerdy, you're a bit techie, you're going to have a lot of fun with UnRAID. It's really fun setting up. It's nice kind of setting up, learning new things, setting up like a new container you've never set up before, finding a problem that you have maybe in your house. It's really nice to find a problem and overcome that yourself. For instance, you might want to run Home Assistant and automate your house. Run it on the UnRAID server, and you've got a problem, you're learning to overcome it, and it can be a lot of fun. It can be a whole lot of fun, sorting out little bits and pieces. And I think that's one great thing about UnRAID, tying back into the good community. It's just really fun. On the community, you'll find ideas you didn't think about. We've got a vibrant community that kind of make various Docker containers for UnRAID. It's extremely easy to install a Docker container. The Docker manager makes it very, very simple to install. So I'd say UnRAID is a whole bunch of fun.
I think, unfortunately,
to the right people.
I mean, again, I would love to counterpoint that and say NAS is fun, but there's a reason there aren't that many NAS YouTube channels. You know what I'm saying? And the thing with NAS being a turnkey solution and having, I'm not going to say limitations, but I'm going to say something in terms of scalability and upgradability, something of a glass ceiling compared to UnRAID. The result is that experimentation isn't fun. You find experimentation in turnkey NAS in containers. You find it in people that, SSH into the back and start having their own fun around the back. But that is by no means what I would consider community level fun. And container, as far as, dicking around with containers is, that can be done on anything. So I don't think I could, in good conscience, say, oh yeah, that means turnkey NAS is a fun. Come over here, everyone. Let's do a Plex doc. No, but no, I've got to concede that point that network attached storage in turnkey solutions is very rarely as fun as an experimentation exercise. Even some of my, I believe I mentioned this on the Oncast podcast. Some of my earliest experiences of servers was running game servers for like Soldier of Fortune, Jedi Academy, and stuff like that. And the fun of those was changing a lot of the values that were going in. And a lot of what I learned started from that. Now, had I bought a turnkey NAS, it would have done the job, and it probably would have done the job with me doing, very, knowing like friction on my part. It would have been smooth. There would have been online guides. There would have been, premium support that's included within my purchase rather than as a possible extra. But at the same time, I don't think it would have scaled my base level knowledge at the beginning, which is, pretty much like with everything there. So I think it's only fair for me to at least put my hand up and say that I can't argue with that. UnRAID being fun. I just wish people found NAS as fun as I did. But I think we've covered all the points today, haven't we?
So, yeah.
I'm not going to say who won. I'm sure you'll tell us in the comments. I'm fairly certain I know
I don't think either of us have won. It's like, as my dad would say, it's horses for courses. I think that's one of his old sayings.
I think if you're going to take anything away from this video, everyone, the people that won were EDF Energy, Southern Water, Scottish Power, all of those people. But thank you so much for joining us, Ed. Again, there will be links to SpaceInvaderOne and a bunch of the videos that we talked about already on Ed's channel linked below. We've also got a few guides on our side, frankly not as good, that cover some bits and bobs in UnRAID, as well as how to utilize UnRAID or install UnRAID on existing turnkey NAS solutions in a way that you can flippity flop and you can skip between them in a dual OS without voiding your warranty if you do it right. So do check those out. But apart from that, thank you so much for joining us today, Ed, and everyone that's watching.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you on our respective channels next time.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I've really enjoyed talking to you as always. Thank you, Robbie.
Awesome. See you soon.
Thank you.